righty. Looks like we are live.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Overflow. We are so glad to have you this afternoon, Monday. Can't believe it's the last day of November, and that it's already going to be December of 2020. I don't even know. It doesn't even feel like a real month to me, but thanks so much for joining us. As always, the goal of Overflow is to walk through our sermon from the day before and get a chance to process it together, ask some of our practical questions, and to really look at how does this affect our daily living? How can we change how we live in order to be more like Christ and experience God in our lives? We love engagement. And so if you're listening live with us while we're recording this, please just say that you're here or say hello, or give a shout out or leave a comment or even ask a question. If you've got a question or a thought, just chat away and we'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, we've got Pastor Juno this morning or afternoon, and we've got Pastor Ryan and myself. And Pastor Juno gave the message yesterday, so he's going to give us his recap. Go ahead.
Okay. The message, excuse me. First one in our Advent series, and it was from Luke. Yeah, I think most of you know that. Luke 1, 26 to 38. And really, it's Mary's story. And I think at times we can glamorize it or just think, oh, nice little Mary was chosen by God to deliver Jesus to the world. Isn't that swell? And yet, in reality, her life was a mess. Her marriage was a mess. Her finances were a mess. The government was a mess. Her community was a mess. And because she said yes to Jesus didn't make her life any easier. In fact, some of those messes were caused because she said yes to Jesus. And then I think in our culture at times, we think because we love Jesus, we should be smooth sailing. And none of this stuff, none of us should get sick. None of us should get COVID. None of us should get cancer. None of us should get anything. But life should be well. And I should get promotions and pay raises. And I don't think any of that's promised in Scripture. So I just talked a little bit about the messes, and that it's through the it's in the midst of the messes that the miracles happen. In the midst of the messages, well, there you go. That miracles happen. That's a tongue twister. But anyway, so, and just the challenge of in the midst of the message and in the midst of the messes, God has done some incredible things through our church, some really astounding things. And we at times can focus on the mess so much that we miss the miracle. And even in our own lives, there's no doubt some pain out there and troubled hearts and anxiousness. And yet we need to remember that God is in the midst of the mess. And in that midst of the mess, God's miracle is emerging. And we need to be looking for it and seeing what role we can play in that.
Yeah, well said. Thanks, Juno. I feel like there's a lot of tongue twisters in there, too.
Oh, I did. Luckily, they didn't happen. I don't think I was tongue twisted yesterday, but maybe it's just early for me. Anyway.
Yeah, I loved the focus of this sermon and just the miracles that come from the messes. And I think it's just a very timely message for all of us, especially going through COVID and going back into stay-at-home orders and a rise in numbers and hospitalizations and deaths and all the things. And really, this is our second time around with sort of this big upswing again. They're saying the numbers are pretty consistent with when this first started in March and April. But it's almost like here we are, 6, 7, 8 months later.
8 months later, March.
And there's a lot of messes, I think, that have been created or that we've experienced over this time of COVID. And, you talked about struggling marriages. You talked about finances and community and job loss and all sorts of things. And, some of us are still really feeling a lot of the repercussions. And in some ways, it feels like there's no end in sight. So, yeah, I felt like this was just very timely. Our first question for...
Well, let me pause. Ryan, I don't know if you remember, a few weeks ago, I said, Ryan, I got the same passage I did a year ago. Maybe I'll just repeat that sermon. I go, nobody's going to remember it anyway. And you're like, no, you should probably review it and come up with a different perspective. And so I went from last year about how what did Mary do to prepare her heart to say yes to God? And this year she was in the middle of the messes. So anyway, so
No,
not that I would have that would have been my first repeat sermon since I've been here, but I didn't do it. So
That's not something that we do as pastors, we promise.
no, it was just like, I'm not going to, that's the same passage. It's the exact same passage. It's like, why don't we just hit the tape? Oh, we could have done a streaming message and just showed it from last year. Anyway, okay. So that's a reminder that God's word, it's living, and not that God's word's changed, but we as individuals have changed, and how I read it and studied it this time was different than last time, and that's what makes it alive in our hearts. Okay.
Not to mention the context of the world around is changing. This December is a lot more different than last December.
Amen. Yeah, and we as pastors and preachers need to be tuned into that. So.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a great, demonstration of, how God's word is alive, and something we read a year ago, the exact same passage, has total different meaning and value speaking into our life today.
Yep.
Awesome. So the first question, Juno, you talked about Mary's life and all the messes she was in with her marriage, her finances, community, things like that. And so, what messes have you experienced, or have we experienced in our lives? What has needed some care, some attention? What's been disorganized or neglected or needs help? And this can be a mess that we are currently in, or it could be even a mess from the past and kind of how we worked through that. And maybe a miracle that God worked through that.
Well, one thing, it could have been a worse mess, but even before I arrived, 7 years ago or 7, community was important to New Life and small groups, and we call them life groups now. But if we didn't have that system in place with our ministering elders as well, for those who aren't in a life group, giving care would have just killed us as a staff, I think. We would have been running around, not that we don't give care, but that we don't have to give it to the 300 or 350 people on our roster, on our membership list. And so I was thankful that the mess, and probably the miracle in the mess, is that it's reminded each of us that God can use us. You don't need to be the pastor, and that you're in a relationship and you have value to those people in your life group. You are significant to those people. You are needed. And so I did think that's one of the reminders of the miracles and the messes, is that our folks hopefully feel like God can use them.
Yeah, I think, I guess my response to this question is a little different, but one of the things about COVID is it feels like life is a lot more busy with trying to navigate the constant change and the restrictions of COVID and the lifestyle changes. I mean, in some ways we have less going on as far as gatherings and events, but in other ways it's more difficult to just do things like shop and care for your kids and your home and just all the stuff that's going on and manage all of the dynamics with the pandemic. And so I would say it just feels like our life, my family and my personal life, just gets messy faster, and there's less time and energy and capacity to clean up the mess. And so I think what I've just noticed during this season is it's not that, my marriage is falling apart, or that I've lost my job, or that I've lost a loved one, which I know many people who've experienced a lot of those things. But it's more that it's very easy for a small thing to become very stressful in my marriage, and for it to blow out of proportion very quickly. And to not have the time and energy or capacity to pay attention to that, to fix that, or stress with my kids and things that they've got going on, or behavioral issues, or the stress that they're going through with the constant change, and just things can get really messy there. And then I feel like I don't have the capacity to really clean it up. And so I guess, the thing that I'm working on right now is I would say, is address the mess. And it's making sure that I find the time to see what's getting messy in my life and then to give it the proper time, care, and attention to make sure that that my family is cared for, that my responsibilities are handled, that I'm able to love and care for others, my neighbors and family and friends, as much as I can during the season. And so, I guess for me, it's less about one particular thing falling apart, but I just feel like God is calling me to pay closer attention to things that are starting to get messy, and make sure I'm just on top of things, so that way they don't fall apart and get to a really bad state. So yeah.
I think for me, one of the things that's gotten messy in my life is just ministry, which is basically my job. Things that I've planned or wanted to do have been kind of thrown into the wind because I can't do them in this season. I've had to call lots of audibles and adjustments, and we had the time where we were online only, and so it's really it's a place where it feels disorganized because it's hard to bring organization to it with so much uncertainty. And it's really been a time of trying to surrender that to God. I'm sure, like many, if you're listening, I'm sure this has affected your job and your regular rhythms in some way and changed how things are, and things feel chaotic and messy, not the way we're like used to, especially for those of us who really like rhythms and patterns and things kind of staying the same. So yeah, that's been a big one for me um, in this season.
Yeah, I think the other thing is it's easy to be in survival mode. It's easy to be in just trying to constantly get through the day. That we can forget like the care essentials of making sure that we are personally and spiritually healthy and engaging with
Mhm.
God daily. Um, make sure that uh, our relationships are healthy, that we're nourishing that we're giving quality time, attention, and care to relationships. We want to make sure that we're healthy physically, spiritually, emotionally. There's a lot of research right now that are saying mental health is going down the tube for a lot of people, and there's a lot more issues going on in the
Mhm.
whole mental health world. And so, making sure that we're aware of what's going on and seeking the help that we need, and letting people know, and being in community together and supporting each other as best as we can. I think it's really, really important.
Mhm.
Yeah. I found too in the mess, the change, and we all obviously change impacts everybody all the time and in some different ways. But I mean, there is just a constant change. And the minute Ryan, the minute you get that student, that event planned, you got to change it, or you got to cancel it. And it's just like, uh, while it may appear that there's less activities going on, but I think as leaders, we're probably more inclined to stress because we are trying to lead and to love whoever our part of the church is, and yet it's always changing, and you want to do what's right, you want to do what's safe, you want to do what's best, and yet you think you got it nailed down, like our time of remembrance that we were going to do next Sunday. No sooner had we hit send to let the whole church know that numbers went skyrocketed of COVID cases. So we're like, no, we're not going to do this. We don't want to stream this. Well, we will, but we want people to be there. We want people to be able to give hugs and to weep and cry together. Anyway, so it's just I have found, even though while our schedules may be more open, I think our stress is potentially higher if, like Ryan said, we don't take care of ourselves spiritually
Mhm.
and physically. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think, part of the theme of this is if we're not careful and wise and aware, our mess can get out of control and be devastating, and we have to try to, get it under control before it falls apart. And I think a lot of people let things go too long and don't address them, and just maybe stuff it down or keep it quiet or just try to keep moving. And we all need help, and we all need support, and we all need care, and we all need healing. And I think that's just a really, really big, important part of the messiness of this season. Okay, kind of going on to the next question, a little bit of a impromptu question is just, so much of your sermon, Juno, was about the miracles that come from the messes and about how God was at work miraculously, even this mess that Mary had going on. And so what miracles or blessings have you guys experienced in messy situations where you've seen God do something good out of something difficult?
Well, my daughter mentioned at Thanksgiving, Dad, I've never seen you so much because of COVID. And because I can work anywhere. And so that's been nice. And plane fares have been most of the time relatively inexpensive. And so that's one of the blessings.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say kind of similarly. There were a couple times in the spring more so where I was able to. I went on a trip with my parents. They were taking my little brother's autistic through medical treatment, and I was able to go with them because everything was kind of remote, and I continued to do church stuff remotely. And that was a blessing and a big help to my parents, especially. And I also went home for an extra week or two and worked from there when everything was online, because they really needed help caring for my brother who he's had an adult day program, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's all canceled because of COVID. So caring for him is a lot more difficult. And he's a grown man like me, and he's big and physical, and he can just be a challenge sometimes for my family. So I was able to help them more, but really, I think another thing, even though the ministry has been chaotic and planning, as I talked about earlier, I have to kind of give my plans up, and I've seen God do a lot of really cool things, and like students are really craving human interaction in a new way, and so at youth group, our attendance is actually, I mean, probably a tiny bit lower than what it was before COVID. And some students' parents don't want them to come because of COVID, and I fully respect that decision. But we've had a really consistent turnout. And I feel like in some ways our community bonding, we spend time together, is deeper because people are craving that more and want that more. And that's their chance to get it. So I think, and I know I'm talking to a couple of my small group leaders, their small group seems to like way more open, want to talk more than they have in the past because of because I attribute that to COVID and being only to be with other people so often. So I think there are silver linings, and I feel like the youth ministry overall, for what this season is, I'm happy with how it's going. I have bigger dreams and bigger plans, and I want more. But I feel like God has really done cool things in this season to make it what it is. And yeah, and I also think last thing I'll say is on a more personal level. Um, for me, I know other people might have a different experience. For me and my wife Sarah, we've been both at the house more and spending more time together. And I actually think that's been really good for our relationship. And I feel like it's strengthened our marriage, and we've been able to talk more. And because sometimes with me being at the church in the evenings for different events and stuff, it feels like I don't see her half the week, or maybe not quite half the week for a few days. But our relationship has gotten stronger. I know that the joke is that during COVID is when married couples are forced in the same house, they butt heads more. But I think maybe miraculously for us, it's been mostly good, and that hasn't been the case as much. So it's been cool, and it's been good for us some ways. So I think there's always silver linings, and there's always you gotta make the best of a bad situation, and you have to do that to stay sane in this season, because for a lot of how crazy it is for so many people. So
Yeah, sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, through COVID, we've been trying to take advantage of like the opportunity to be having some more family time and doing some more outdoors kind of activities. And I think it's definitely been good for us. I think there's been some good blessings in that. But even beyond COVID, I would say as I just reflect back on my life, the times I feel that God has moved the most in me has been the most difficult times that I've faced, when I've been in genuine struggle and genuine loss and deep pain and depression and anxiety and just life altering, earth shattering, just difficult seasons, where you're just saying like, God, I just can't do this without you. And I need you. And you got to work this out because it's not happening, or I don't know where to turn, or these moments of desperation where you're just like, God, it's got to be up to you to do something. I don't know what to do. I think those are the moments where I feel like I've seen God work the most powerfully in my life. And so it's almost as if we need messes in order to experience the miracles. And I'm not saying theologically that God causes the messes so that he can bring miracles. But we do believe that the scripture says that he works for good out of all things, in all situations. And we believe that God can bring redemption and healing and restoration and blessing, even through the worst things, often creatively or through different routes. But I think that's taught me to embrace the messes a little bit more, knowing that God works often miraculously in the messes. And it doesn't make hard seasons all of a sudden really easy to bear. But I think we know that if you know that God is doing something, there's a little bit more hope there. And there's a little bit more joy and patience in God's process.
Yes.
I know just want to echo everything you said, because I've had the same experience. Like, one of my most difficult seasons of my life is when I became a Christian, or is in that season I became a Christian, and I feel like I wouldn't have unless I experienced those type of difficulties. And I think that those difficulties and seeing God work in them, and then being able to look back at them, sometimes can be the things that deepen and strengthen our faith the most. And I think that if we just live life of relative comfort and everything's easy, it almost teaches us to not rely on God and not to look to him, because if everything's easy, then we don't have the struggle where we need to look to God. So no, again, I don't think God causes the struggle, like you said, or but I think that it's a part of life. It's a part of the way our world works, due to sin and due to the brokenness of us as people. And that is an essential part of how we grow in faith and grow in and how we love God more, even through the tough times.
Yeah, definitely.
And well, it's interesting that all these, I don't know if you get what you listen to, podcasts or read, but there's no blueprint for leading through a pandemic. Everything organizationally changes.
Yeah.
And it's like all these consultants, it's like, what you wrote 3 years ago isn't going to work this year, and so I find that very interesting. But on the lighter side, pardon?
I was just gonna joke, like, there's no blueprint. I've been reading a bunch of pastors from 1918 and the Spanish flu to learn what they did.
Okay, that's a little different. Okay, but anyway,
100 years ago.
100 years ago, when there was no internet either. So it was okay. But no, how are you dealing with people? How do you give pastoral care? How are we doing funerals? But on the other lighter side, it's like, I think I've cooked more in the last few months in my apartment than I ever have. And so that's good.
Yeah.
In fact, my sister was just giving me some recipes yesterday. So I'm sure I'll do more cooking, because it's like, that's what you do. So.
Yeah. What else are you going to do?
and enjoy it. It's like, if you screwed up, then I just walk down to Popeyes, and get a sandwich.
Is that like a daily occurrence where you mess up?
No, it's not. It's not. I am intentional to make that not a daily occurrence.
At least every other day. Come on.
No, I think 1 week it was only one. So that's when I was in. That was it when I was in Michigan. There wasn't one.
This is like becoming like a support group. Like, I'm Somali, and I had Popeyes 3 times this week.
Oh, that could be pretty funny. Okay, all right. Next question.
So let's wrap it up, and let's just talk about Christmas and Advent and this Advent season. Kind of in light of this sermon, what is something that you are or you're hoping to embrace this season that is helpful towards being faithful to follow Jesus? Our sermon series is titled "Oh Come All Ye Faithful," and part of the focus is just a return to faithfulness in God. And maybe we've gotten a little off track, or we've gotten a little out of sorts in whatever way that looks. So, so what's something that this season you want to come back to, or that you want to do a little differently to, yeah, return to that faithfulness in a sense, or just embrace a lifestyle that is honoring to God?
Well, throughout the whole COVID experience or pandemic, I'm not sure what we should be calling it, whatever. It's easy to say, oh, a lot has changed. You know what? We're no longer in the church building, and you can't have all these lunch meetings. You can't do, things have changed. But now during Christmas, I think we're going to experience even a bigger impact on that change because of all the traditions that of the holidays are now many of them are being flushed down the toilet. And so it's going to be a challenge to say, okay, am I worshiping my tradition, or how can I still worship and give thanks and remember whose I am without the things that I have found so much comfort in the past. And so I just think it'll be another testing point for probably many people as the thermostat of change. It may not go up at all, but we are in the middle of some extraordinarily powerful memories in people's hearts and minds over their whole lifetime. And now it's changing. And so we as leaders, and if our life group leaders are listening, we need to be attentive to that and to know that's a grieving experience. It's a good grieving experience. But anyway, just to walk people through that. And really, get used to the change. For me, once we plan an event, it's got to change. Well, okay, go to plan B, go to plan C, go to plan D, and something will happen. They're just human plans, but God is with us, and God will continue to work through us and through our people to change the world and to point the world toward him. But anyway.
Yeah, that sounds good. I know for me, kind of one just kind of simple practical thing that I'm trying to do is every night that we're home, I'm trying to take the kids on a walk around like 6:30 or so around the neighborhood to just see the different houses that have Christmas lit up. And we kind of live in an interesting place where it's sort of like a bunch of condos, and each like unit or each building has like 4 units in it. And so there's a lot of different people who decorate their different sections. There's probably 30 or 40 different houses or sections that we can see on a 30-minute walk. And so we've just started doing that. We've done it twice. We have a wagon that we've decorated with some battery operated lights, and we have some like light up toys that we take and we make some hot chocolate. And then we head on out over to just walk around the neighborhood. And I've found that's been good for a few things. Number one, when the kids are home, they just tend to destroy the house. And destroy the house, it just gets frustrating for their mom and myself, and it's difficult to manage, and they fight over stuff. But when they're on the walk, they're usually having a really good time, and they're having fun with each other, and they're really excited.
Yeah, and then you let them destroy your neighbor's Christmas decorations.
Yeah.
You don't clean it up.
Grab that.
Daddy, I got these new lights. These are going to be good.
Yep. No, you're not supposed to touch that, baby. Please don't. Yeah, goes. But it helps me to have a fun time with them. It's bonding for us, and I feel like I'm just a lot more patient with them. And it's just been good for our relationship. It's been good for our home. It's been good like as a night routine, and it just gives us some quality time together. And I think that habit is just helpful in being a good father and being a good husband and helping our kids to just have a good experience and just do some fun things together. So I know that's helped with the messes, so to speak, that tend to literally the house is not getting messy while they're out of the house, but also there's less fighting, then there's less go to timeout, and there's less daddy's just mad at me. And so that's just been a positive thing for us, for sure.
Hey, let me affirm you in that. Judea may remember, I'm not sure if the little ones will, but maybe they will if you keep doing it, but you are probably creating some incredible traditions in their hearts. That Christmas time, walking around the neighborhood with dad. Yeah. Now, if you have a couple more kids, I'm not sure you'll still be able to do that, but no, just joking. But no, I think those are going to be really the blessing in the midst of this mess is that, they're having a nightly walk with their dad and their siblings. And that is rich and seldom happens in our culture today. So good job.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that I felt like God has been calling me more to more, even over this last holiday weekend, is personal sacrifice, and I think that's manifested itself in a number of ways. Sarah, my wife, is working remotely, and she's on Zoom all the time. And the last few months, she's become increasingly burnt out and tired as a result of that. And I've taken on more of like doing more chores than I used to do, and running errands for her. And I've done more cooking and stuff like that. And just to help her, especially because I feel like she used to come home from work with a lot more energy than she does, even though now she doesn't drive anywhere. But it's just a different type of draining, doing it all on Zoom and on the computer. And then also, I was just home for Thanksgiving with my family, and my parents caring for my little brother, and it's really hard for them, and they're struggling. And I came home and I did a lot more to help out than I normally do. Like, I'm 27. In the past, I've come home from college 4 or 5 years ago, and now coming home as now married. But I found myself doing more of the chores and like cleaning for my parents, and doing more to help out caring for my brother. And also, my mom's having a hard time. Particular, I feel like in some ways my relationship with them is changing, and I feel like I'm not. I'm definitely. I wouldn't say I'm the adult in the relationship, but I'm not as much of a kid as I once was, and I'm taking on more responsibility and sacrificing more to help them, even when I'm there, when I can help. So I had another example, and I forgot what it was, um, but yeah, just taking on more sacrifice, where I'm looking for ways that I can give and help others, because I know so many people are having a really, really hard time during the season, and I feel like I do have the capacity to try and sacrifice more and help other people more. Um, and just so trying to be very intentional with that, and trying to give more. And that's what the Christmas season is about, right? Giving and loving, and loving others and finding ways to give back. So anyways.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on the Overflow. We hope this time has been a blessing for you, has been encouraging, has been helpful. And we look forward to having you with us next Monday at noon. And otherwise, have a great week.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us.